Today on the Big Six in 60, Houston loses to Iowa State in a top 10 matchup.
Houston lets this one slip away.
The Dolphins cut Tyreek Hill and others.
The Dolphins and John Eric Sullivan woke up and said, I don't care that today is technically a holiday. We're going to cut everybody on the list.
And the Celtics hope to get Jayson Tatum back soon.
Jayson Tatum is ramping up. He is going to come back.
This is the Big Six in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big Six in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big Six in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Number 2 Houston went into Ames and fell to Iowa State for the Cougars' third loss of the season and the Cyclones' second straight top 10 win. After the matchup, Parker Ainsworth had the recap on Locked On Cougs.
Houston lets this one slip away. They're up 10 with about 7 minutes to go. There's a Kingston 3 to get him to 20 points. And it feels like things are rolling. And it goes on, and there's a very controversial kicked ball call. Controversial because it was wrong. I guess that's the controversy is there's a kicked ball call that was wrong with a few minutes to go. The crowd was dead. Houston was kind of rolling. The kicked ball defeated a trap that was leading to a Houston fast break. Clearly on replay, no kick ball, but they called it. You can't review it. The ensuing sideline out of bounds play results in a immediate 3-point basket for Iowa State, and the crowd is right back in it. Now, I am not one to blame officials. Houston had several minutes to not, let that beat them, but they ultimately did, and that was the wrong call, right? And I think that's an important momentum swing in this one to keep track of. Honestly, other big part of this game, that same second half stretch, was Emmanuel Sharp, who had 16 first half points and kind of carried the load in the first half, was unavailable for large stretches over 10 minutes of the second half with his 4 fouls sitting on the bench. We're used to seeing JoJo Tugler get into foul trouble, and Emmanuel Sharp was the one in foul trouble in this one, and he is such an important part of this offense in these tight games we saw in the first half. Frankly, having that option there would have been a big benefit, especially in that stretch. There was a 10-0 scoring run where Iowa State, once Houston went up 10, to kind of even the game out over a course of time, that Houston had chance after chance after chance and couldn't get a basket. Having Emmanuel out there to get one would have been, let's just say, well appreciated. This thing was also super close and nitpicky in other spots too. The Heisey 3 in the corner that ultimately gives them their final lead there at Iowa State. He barely has enough time, if you go back and watch that, to get the ball off. He catches and releases in milliseconds. It's an awkward release with Kingston Fleming's closing out, the shot clock winding down. And, of course, it splashes at the bottom of the net. He ends up being, I believe, the second leading scorer. He had 11 points, and no one had more than 12 at Iowa State, right? He's a bench guy that's made some important plays. I don't mean to diminish his role in the team, but he's not like a guy you scout we have to shut him down, right? These several moments like this in that basketball game that just don't quite go Houston's way. And look, there were moments that did too, right? I mean, they say that this Houston had, all things were wrong. Houston had a 10-point lead on a top 10 team on the road in their place in one of the most hostile environments in America. And they just can't quite seal it. Now, I will say, I said at the start of this gauntlet, this gauntlet where you have Iowa State on the road tonight, you've got Arizona next weekend, and at Kansas next Monday, that they were going to lose one of those 3 games. If this is it, you end up learning from this and winning 2 big ones next weekend, it may feel off or not. I do think, though, that at the end of the day, you're going to feel like you probably should have had this one because you were up 10 in the driver's seat at the 7-minute mark, and you just couldn't quite finish it. You couldn't quite seal the deal. I thought Miles Houston played really, really well in large stretches of the night tonight. His missed free throw at the front end of a 1-and-1 at kind of a need to get points kind of possession for Houston really proved monumental because of the way that the rest of the game shaped out after that. And so it's just one of those things where it's like this, and he's an over 80% free throw shooter this season. Like it's just these little itty bitty things that just add up, and that's how you lose these super close matchups. Now, in the big picture, yes, you let one slip on the road. I guess technically that means you're tied for first in the Big 12 with Arizona, as opposed to having the outright first place shot, which makes next Saturday that much more important, right? And all kinds of chaos around that. And you're competing for a 1 seed. You want to be a 1 or a 2 so you can get into the South Regional and go through Houston and all that. Those are all big, 3,000 foot looking issues. And a very micro issue, though, like the things that were wrong with this team would have been also wrong with this team had that Heisey shot missed and they made one more three. Right? Like the big picture of things there would still have been there, and it's hard to like mask and cover that up in each of these things. I got people flying in with comments here. Talking about refereeing, heartbreaking loss, momentum killing, kick ball call. 10 in a row with less than 6 minutes left, calling a timeout. Samson always last class. They had several stop balls. The 10-0 run, though, to me was not, the 10-0 run to me at the end with the stop ball, the deal there to me was not that they weren't getting good shots, weren't getting offense, they weren't making shots. And that was a really big problem. I look at, though, like what's going to call in a timeout. You only got a couple left at that point. You want to have them for some drawn up sets as they tried to draw up there at the end to lift Sanak and attack with Flemings when Fleming slipped down. The possession we haven't really talked about yet. Houston is down 2. And I guess I should point out, after the Milo Smith's free throw, Houston is down 2 and elects not to foul with 43 seconds left. And JoJo Tucker gets a block. Houston gets the rebound. They have about 20 seconds, like 19.5 seconds left with the ball and a timeout. They used one of those timeouts that they did not use earlier and drop a play. And the play attacks Flemings off of a phantom screen. It lifts Chris Sanak for some spacing. And Fleming slips. He just slips. Initially, I was like, did he get tripped? The TV angle was kind of awkward. Some different fans back their heads and stuff like that. And maybe he got slightly tripped by a little bit shoelace here or there, whatever. But that's not really the problem. Problem is he falls down. Ball goes loose. Houston can't come up with it. I guess Sanak kind of like tries to flip a shot up or something, and it doesn't work, right? And then I would say gets the ball back. You foul. They miss the free throw, but Lipsy gets the rebound. That's all downhill from there. And this one's going to hurt because it was so winnable, and there's going to be so few teams that have the opportunity to say that about a road game in Ames, Iowa. You really had a chance to do something special out there. And I don't think that means that this team can't do special things. There's a chance that they, again, win at Arizona and win versus Arizona and win at Kansas. And we're saying, like, man, they learned their lessons in Ames, Iowa, and went on to win. Remember the last time Houston lost at Iowa State, what happened the rest of Big 12 play that season, right? It was back in 2024, but Jamal Shed had one of the all-time great years the rest of the year. This is obviously later in the season to mid-February. That one's early January, but it does feel like this suddenly creates an opportunity to learn from it. It also, I think, several people pointing out, but Alan just typed it in, so I'm pulling his name up here. It kind of makes those two games feel like you got to get at least one, if not both of them. You certainly, if you want to win the conference, need to beat Arizona to kind of get the head-to-head matchup and get the one game up there. As daunting as that may seem, you do get them at home. We know how well Houston plays at Fertitta. Kansas is not the Kansas of old, but they're not the Kansas of bad days either. And you don't know what you're going to get out of Darren Peterson, all that on a big Monday. And you know that Fogg adds about 10 points or whatever they're doing. That's going to be a challenging game. Suddenly Saturday feels like a lot bigger deal because, again, you should have won that one.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel makes so much sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, Play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. The Miami Dolphins made some big moves in getting rid of big names to start the week. Miami let Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb go, among others, and Locked On Dolphins host Kyle Krabs tells us where the team goes from here.
The Dolphins and John Eric Sullivan woke up and said, I don't care that today is technically a holiday. We're going to cut everybody on the roster. And not literally everybody on the roster, but right as first Jordan Schultz reports this morning that Bradley Chubb is out. And the Miami Herald, Barry Jackson went as far and was kind enough to clarify. We don't know if that's a now cut or we don't know if that's a post-June 1st designation right now. I have my opinion on that. I'm going to give it. And some of this is off-season blueprint kind of territory. I've been building up to this kind of grand master scheme on how to go about the cap, whatnot, this other thing. So I do some Bradley Chubb content. I get a staff meeting, and I'm on the staff meeting, and then James Daniels goes. Nick Westbrook-Ikine goes. Tyreek Hill goes. And it's just like everybody, heads are rolling down the hill here in South Florida for salary cap compliance purposes. And you can't say the Dolphins aren't salary cap compliant anymore. And the biggest thing for me to note and take away from this is getting all of this done now, I think does have some clues as to what they're going to do with the other big elephant in the room, right? Especially if Bradley Chubb becomes not a post-June 1st designated cut. If they put out the transaction sheet at 4 p.m. today and Bradley Chubb's name is on it, I think there are some clues there as far as how they're going to go about conducting the rest of their business. But let's start with Bradley Chubb, okay? And then we'll do Tyreek Hill, and then we'll do everybody else. So, and I'm sure while I'm sitting on here, let me check my phone that the Dolphins didn't cut anybody else in the process. Okay, no more. Oh, so here you go, Jordan Schultz. Dolphins' preference has been to find a trade partner for Tua Tagovailoa. A cut is possible in the end, but that has been their preference. My understanding is a new regime doesn't want it to drag too long. Sick. Okay, cool. So we'll just throw that log on the fire as we talk about what's going on in Dolphins land. Bradley Chubb. I know that the reaction that some Dolphins fans had was, well, he was a trade deadline conversation piece. Was there any market for Bradley Chubb? The thing to remember about Bradley Chubb is that he was on the amended contract because he missed all of 2024, right? So when you miss all of 2024, then you come back in 2025 and you cut your salary in half and you put that half into like a future roster bonus and sack incentives and playtime incentives, your salary, and then halfway through a season, it's a fraction. It's like 25% of what he's owed this year in cash, which is $20.23 million is what Bradley Chubb was going to be owed by the Dolphins. None of that is guaranteed, and he will get none of it. Right now, he missed his earnings potential to get the money that he put from 2025 back because the Dolphins scoring defense didn't rank high enough. So, but that would have been a concern for a team that was trading for Bradley Chubb at the trade deadline. And probably part of the reason why a trade didn't get done was a team knows, hey, if Bradley Chubb comes in here and has 2 sacks and we finish top 20 in scoring defense, we're going to have to write him a check for an extra $5 million for half a season. And everybody knew what the compensation package was in 2026. Nobody's going to pay Bradley Chubb $20.23 million. You know some of the names that are within $3 million of what Bradley Chubb was scheduled to make in 2026? Nick Bosa, Joshua Hines-Allen, Montez Sweat, Daniil Hunter. These guys are in the same income bracket. Like Chubb was 11th on edge defenders in cash owed in 2026, none of it guaranteed. And that's why he's out. And that's why there's no trade opportunities to be had there with Bradley Chubb. Because there's not a team in the league in their right mind that's going to bring on 30-year-old Bradley Chubb. And I really respect and admire the way that Bradley Chubb played this season. I respect the hell out of him for his leadership elements. I respect how he came back from the injury. I respect how he kind of figured out how to play his game without, I think it was apparent he was kind of missing some of that explosiveness that he had before that 2023 injury. He figured out how to play and be productive, and he led the team in pressures. And I wish Bradley nothing but the best with whatever his career takes him from here, right? But there was not a team in the league that was going to pay $20.25 million for Bradley Chubb for what you're projecting him to be in 2026. And that's why you didn't have a trade market here. And this is why the only avenue that you were going to take was going to be a cut. Now, whether or not you do it post June 1st or not, I'm really fascinated to see if he's going to be on the ledger for the transaction log today. Because if they're going to do this and all these other heads are rolling today, you might as well put him on there. So I think we'll get some clarity by this afternoon on what's happening with Bradley Chubb. But if you cut him now, you save $7.3 million in cap space. You take just short of $24 million in dead cap in 2026. If you wait, you have to hold him until the start of the league year, and then you could designate him as a post-June 1st cut. If you were to do that with Bradley Chubb, the numbers change. But again, because it would be designating him as a post-June 1st cut, you get no salary cap savings until June 2nd. So from the beginning of the league year until June 1st, you're going to carry Bradley Chubb on your salary cap books for $31.2 million. And then you get $20 million in savings, and that $20 million goes into 2027 as 2027 dead cap, right? Your cap debts are what they are. It's just if you hold them past a certain date on the calendar, you can split it between what you have this year and the rest goes into next year, or all in once. And if they move on from Chubb now, it all goes now. It's all going to be 2026 dead cap, and you would still save a decent amount of salary cap. If they put this cap all in 2026, again, I think that can give you some clues on what they ultimately choose to do with Tua when it's all said and done, because that is the big salary number that's flexible. Now, there's some other ones. There's Minkah Fitzpatrick, but they kind of cost themselves some savings with Minkah Fitzpatrick when they gave him more guarantees last year and then put void years on the back end of that contract. Right? So you don't quite have flexibility there like you would have if you'd have just let his contract be as is, but you acquired a player who wanted an adjustment on his contract, and they gave it to him. The Tyreek Hill cut is happening now. That has been confirmed. That is not a post-June 1st cut where you could save more in cap space. No, they need the salary cap space for compliance with Tyreek Hill. And according to the numbers from Over the Cap, just the Tyreek Hill move is going to put them $5.5 million under the salary cap ceiling. So salary cap compliance, done. Sweet. Not a bad gig, right? Just one move. They've made several others. But Tyreek Hill, coming off the injury, this has long been reported as the destiny for Tyreek Hill in 2026. And you kind of knew that was the case with a $36 million salary that was owed to him in the form of a roster bonus and non-guaranteed salary with guarantees that trigger on the 5th day of the league year. It's just, it was probably going to be a cut for Tyreek before the injury happened, and then the injury happened, right? Like with Bradley Chubb, I think the thing that's always very enlightening when you hear teams talk about this kind of process of exploring adding talent, teams have a great deal more value, not for the talent aspect of a player, but for the economic elements of a player. And whether that's Chubb at $20 million in cash or Tyreek at 36, like that, those kinds of figures are non-starters, right? And some of that is the natural maturation of contracts. When you go out and you give big contracts, and everybody knows how many draft picks the Dolphins gave for Bradley Chubb and Tyreek Hill, and that 2022 season was the future that was poured into. And it's kind of poetic in a way, right? That like the tenure of both of these guys potentially is ending on the same day, and at the very least is announced in the same day for what the old regime was in Miami. And Tyreek in that spring 2022 trade, and then Chubb at the trade deadline. That was kind of chips all in, right? And then when you give those contracts out and those players get a little older down the road, right, a couple years later, and they mature, and then there's an injury here and an injury there, and salaries change, but you put a lot of base salary on the back end of the deal to prop up the annual average when you gave the contracts out in the first place, even if the money's not guaranteed. Because remember, they brought more money up from Tyreek Hill from 2026 to pay him in 2025 or pay him in 2024. when he was going through his I want a contract adjustment because everybody else got paid. And Chris Greer said, okay, here, sign on the dotted line. There you go. You get a pay raise and you get more guarantees in 2025, which bit the team in the rear end. The rump, family-friendly programming, is taking a lot of self-constraint with that decision. So Tyreek is going to save you almost $23 million in cap space by moving on from him today. The dead cap charge is 28. So the Dolphins already, after the Zach Wilson contract voided last Friday, they came into today with $39.3 million in dead cap as is. Then Bradley Chubb happens. Then Tyreek Hill happens. And let's just use the Tyreek Hill number right now because we know it to be happening now. We don't know what the destiny is for the Bradley Chubb transaction, whether that's happening today or happening down the road. 28, and I'm going to use round numbers here because Kyle doing math live, especially live, like it's one thing to do math on the show, but to do it actually live is just a catastrophe waiting to happen. So we're going to round the numbers off. 28 and a quarter plus 39.3. $67.5 million in dead cap once the Tyreek Hill cut is processed. But then you also have James Daniels and you also have Nick Westbrook-Akine, and those two guys combined are another 6.2. So now you're at about $73.75 million in dead cap for 2026 before you get Bradley Chubb put into that mix. And if they move on from Bradley Chubb in the here and now, and if they do him as a pre-June 1st, that's another $24 million. Now you're at 97.7. What's going to happen with Tua? Right? Like we did this show a couple months ago. This has potential to shatter, like catastrophically shatter the NFL record for dead cap. And I believe that number happened this past year. Was it did the Jets take it? Because the Jets gave out those contracts last year to Quinnen Williams and to Sauce Gardner, and then they promptly traded both of them. So the Saints had it last year, courtesy of the Derek Carr retirement and that situation. $109 million in dead cap by the Saints last year. The Jets were number 2 at 108.1, so less than $1 million behind. The 49ers also had over $100 million in dead cap last year. Those were the 3 teams. That 109 is an NFL record. The Dolphins, if they move on from Bradley Chubb, are at, come on, use the face ID. Thank you. 97 plus whatever happens with Tua. What happens with Austin Jackson? What happens with Minkah Fitzpatrick? What happens with Alec Ingold? What happens with Jason Sanders, right? This can very quickly become earth-shattering dead cap numbers. And it's a good thing when it's all, you don't want your team to get here, right? But the alternative is to keep keeping these players, keep paying them more cash that's not guaranteed, restructuring them out, and finding yourself, you wake up in 2029 and you're the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints, where you're going to be taking 20-something dead cap charges for players to retire without paying them any more money because you restructured their contracts 6 straight years. I mean, the Saints are just starting to come out of the other end of that wilderness right now. So when we talk about team life cycles, and this is a part of the circle of life in the NFL, embracing this reality and using the salary cap's growth rate. And that's what the Niners did. It's what the Jets did. It's what the Saints did. It's what the Seattle was 4th in the league in dead cap with $88 million. They won the Super Bowl. The Eagles went 11-6. They had 85. The Jaguars went 13-4. They had 85 million. So you actually had of the top 6 teams in the NFL, 4 of the 6 won at least 11 games last year. Use the growth annually, year over year, to your advantage. And that, when you start lopping off 20 for Chubb here, 36 for Tyreek there, whatever you end up doing with some of those other names that we haven't made decisions with, but then James Daniels was 8, just short of 8, and half of that became fully guaranteed like on the 3rd day of the league year. So choosing not to do that, lopping all the cash off, you're cutting off the spending at the head. So when you actually start paying down your credit bill, you don't just have a rolling balance. right? You actually stop spending and putting things on that credit card. So when you make your monthly payment, your balance actually goes down. And that in turn, when you take that medicine, if you will give you this time next year, and especially in 2028, once you're out of whatever happens with the Tua contract as well, that is going to put you in a position to spend and have a lot of cash on hand and a lot of cap space, a lot of credit space against the salary cap. So I'm glad that we're not post June 1sting Tyreek Hill. I don't think they should post June 1st anybody. And that includes Tua. Now, you can't do anything with Tua before June 1st without taking monumental amounts of accelerated salary cap, dead cap. And at some point, it becomes mathematically impossible for you to field a roster that way.
The Boston Celtics have played well this season without star Jayson Tatum, and now it looks like Tatum could be on his way to getting back on the floor. With more info on the comeback, here's John Corrales with Locked On Celtics.
I think it's pretty clear Jayson Tatum is ramping up. He is going to come back. You don't practice and meet the media without having a plan to come back. You don't drop a trailer for your behind the scenes look at your rehab without planning to come back, right? There's the all of a sudden March 1st, the game against Philly gets flexed from 6 p.m. local coverage to NBC coverage at 8 p.m.
I was this close.
Right? It's there. It's happening. Okay?
I was this close.
It's happening. There are going to be winners and losers. So, in the grand scheme of things, Tom, who's the winner? We all are.
Yeah,
we all win.
The Boston Celtics are the winner from Jayson Tatum coming back.
They will absolutely be the winners because he's coming back and he's gonna be, who knows.
Yeah,
I always caution, like, his return is still going to be part of his rehab. His first game back, even if it is against Philly, is a rehab stint. It's going to be 20 minutes or so, probably off the bench, limited time, limited scope, very carefully orchestrated. And then maybe he misses a game and it's going to be kind of like a hit or miss. So
this is why I still think he should come back against the Nets February 27th.
Also possible.
A lot of signs lining up for the Sixers game. Yes.
So either way, maybe that's his second game back. I mean, it's just because maybe that's just a game that the NBC just says we want to make sure that we get Tatum.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. As far as players go, who are the winners if Tatum comes back? I don't know if he's number one on my list, but I wrote about this at Celtics on SI. I got 3 names for you. I'll throw these out there. Number 1, Sam Hauser. He's going to be, I believe, a starter.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, instead of Baylor Shireman or Jordan Walsh, it's going to be Jayson Tatum in that lineup next to him. This is eventually when Tatum becomes a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Hauser becomes the guy that you're just going to have to live with, I think, because your starting lineup eventually will be Tatum, Brown, Derek White. I believe Vucevic is going to be in there.
Yep.
And Sam Hauser. Who do you like? Sam right now is getting a lot of extra attention because there are guys like Walsh and Shireman out there. Ugo, just inconsistent shooters. Maybe they'll get hot, whatever. Sam gets a little extra attention. Don't let him get hot. Now he's going to be the guy that's wide open. He's going to get so many more cleaner looks. I think this is going to be whenever Tatum does get back into the starting lineup, I think Hauser's going to be one of the big winners.
Yep. No, I agree with that. And I mean, I think, Hauser's honestly one of the things that's happened with Hauser this season is he's been given much more difficult defensive assignments a lot of the time. Like he's had to really take on some tough defensive assignments. And when we'll see how long it takes Tatum to get to that stage, probably not, again, like you're saying, probably very similar to the starting lineup. It won't be happening right away, but when Tatum is back, somewhat close to fully, he will be taking on a lot of those tougher defensive assignments. So Hauser will also probably get a little bit of a break on that end too, which could be nice for him as well.
Vooch, obviously a big winner. I think he's got to be maybe the number one winner. Actually, my next guy is the number one winner, I think. But Vooch, I think he becomes a starter. And not only that, if things go well, think about this. The Celtics let Al Horford walk. They let Porzingis walk. If Vooch works with Tatum, you think he's going to go to Brad Stevens and be like, can we not let this guy walk?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the Celtics are willing to pay Vooch. It's probably not going to be anything more than the taxpayer mid-level at this point. But maybe he instead of being like, hey, Vooch, we're going to take it or leave it the minimum. If Tatum says, hey, I like playing with this guy, they'll be, all right, here's $5 million, here's $6 million, instead of just 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I know who your next guy is, and I agree that he's probably the biggest winner. But I will throw my lot in with Vooch just for the sake of being argumentative, but not really, because I think that he's really set up for a lot of success here. I think on this Celtics team, that last game against the Bulls before the break, obviously it's the Bulls, whatever, but the amount of just elbow room that Vooch had to shoot some of those shots, that's not going away. Like those shots are going to be there for him, and he's probably going to be a lot more available for the Celtics. I mean, no, like knock on wood, obviously, but he seems like he's going to be a lot more available for the Celtics than Kristaps Porzingis was. And Porzingis, I mean, the types of looks that he got were really, really good. Vucevic is going to get all of those looks, and he's a really good passer, right? So you've got a guy who is getting these wide open pick and pop looks, who can like roll off the pick and roll and either catch it on the roll or seal his guy off, right? And get these really good post up looks and finish down there. Like he's really good at trapping a guy when he rolls and keeping that guy down, stuck like in jail under the basket. Like he's really good at that. And by the way, he's a really good passer. So like, I mean, listen, as Anthony Simons' number one fan, I like painful, obviously, but it's like, I get it. Like, of course, like this is the thing, right? It's like this, and this is why Brad Stevens is so annoying to like cover. Cause it's like, what am I going to do? Tell Brad Stevens you got it wrong with Vucevic? Obviously he didn't, you know, like, obviously that was going to be the right move on like a bunch of different levels. But anyway, I think Vucevic is I think not only is he a big winner from Tatum's return, because I mean, that just puts everything, exponentially higher, right? I think he's also just a big winner for coming to the Celtics. Like this is just the setup that he's about to find himself in. I think I think he seems like a competitive dude. I think he's going to really enjoy being on this team with this coach, and the amount of space and the types of looks he's about to get, I think are really going to be appealing for him.
Okay, smart guy. You said you know who my last guy is. Who do you think it is?
I'm going to go on a limb and guess that your last guy is Derek White.
Son of...
Listen,
Yeah, it's Derek White.
Yeah,
it's Derek White. Because things just snap back into place for Derek White. And this is the most exciting part of Tatum's return for me, aside from, hey, Jayson Tatum's coming back to play basketball, which is always fun. Derek White has this season gone from Mr. Spot Up to Mr. Off the Dribble, and it's been difficult.
He's a lot better at Mr. Spot Up. Yeah.
So this is according to Synergy Sports. Pick and roll ball handler this season 34.5% of the time, and spotting up just about 25% of the time. Last season, just the complete flip. Last season was spotting up 34% of the time, and pick and roll ball handler about 23%. Like, so the numbers are opposite. But here's the biggest problem. Pick and rolls, his production is about the same. 9.5, like 0.954 points per possession. Okay. So it's in that, it was 0.954 here and 0.964 last year. So off the pick and roll, that's about what he is as a scorer, as the pick and roll ball handler. Spot ups last year, just about 1.3 points per possession. Elite number. Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
This year, the spot ups have dropped down to 0.94, which is okay, but nah, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that he was good at last year, he's not good at anymore, because I think this is so much more involved in the pick and roll ball handling. Well, that's Tatum's thing. Tatum is the pick and roll ball handler. So I think once Tatum gets back into that starting lineup, those numbers flip again, and all of a sudden Derek White starts putting up 20, 25, 30, and you start having a lot more of those games. I think the shooting starts to creep up. We're going to start looking at his splits. His March splits are going to start to look a little bit better. There's going to be a couple of weeks in April where people are saying, oh, wow, is Derek White peaking at the right time? We should clip this. Is Derek White peaking at the right time? That's going to be the discussion in April, because I just feel like Tatum snaps everything back into place.
Yep. I don't have much to add to that. I agree on all fronts.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel makes so much sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Kansas State basketball fired Jerome Tang last week with cause, which has started a legal dispute between the coach and the school. To take a look at how this could play out, here's Christian Raw with Locked On Kansas State.
What is going on with Kansas State's men's basketball team? Gene Taylor, of course, firing Jerome Tang, for cause. And of course, we're going to dive into this one. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show. Look, right off the bat, this has been wild. I have gone and told my viewers, I think this is pretty light, the reason that he has been terminated. But of course, I don't have a professional background in this. Before we dive into some of this deep standard, the wording and things of this nature, what is your overall take of this? Is this the same feeling as you? Do you feel like this is a light reason for termination of cause?
Yeah, first of all, Christian, thanks so much for having me on. And I would tend to agree. It was definitely a little surprising. It was definitely a lot surprising when Kansas State announced that they were going to be firing him for cause. It didn't really seem like he did anything that was really that bad or really anything close to what you normally see, coaches getting fired for cause for, which is usually, some kind of NCAA scandal or, some personal life scandal. Nothing really like that. I mean, yes, it was kind of, directly after this press conference where he said some things that maybe he shouldn't have said about his players, but nothing that, at least in my experience, at least from what I think all of us have seen, nothing that would normally rise to the level of being a for cause type of termination. But clearly Kansas State disagrees.
The Mercury reported this initially, that he was going to be terminated for cause. And in their article, they mentioned 3 of the clauses of his contract, starting with the 9th clause. And in the section, they quoted, quote, conducting themselves at all time in a manner consistent with the position of head coach, an instructor of student athletics, and an ambassador and representative of Kansas State Athletic in the university. And then with the 10th and 11th, it's basically the same thing, establishing, maintaining, and enforcing standards of conduct, disciplinary rules and sanctions, fairly and uniformly for the team's student athletes to ensure academic and moral integrity while encouraging excellence. And then just the 11th, it says that Jerome Tang must be engaging in and actively monitoring to ensure the program's coaches and employees are engaging in fair and safe, responsible treatment of the team's student athletes in avoiding behavior, actions, and activities that could jeopardize a student athlete's welfare, health, or safety. Sounds a little broad, of course, in the case of things like this. The Cincinnati comments are the one that Gene Taylor reported on in the press conference on Sunday night. and those ones were saying that these players don't deserve to wear the uniform, and stating that they will no longer be here next year, most likely, meaning they will enter the transfer portal and not be a member of the squad. Do you feel like those comments fit into this clause right here?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head by calling it broad, because that's exactly what it is. It's incredibly broad language, and it really ties into kind of the claim that's being made by Kansas State in all this, which is to say he breached his contract. He didn't do what he was supposed to do under the contract. Yes, obviously the contract is overall to be the head coach of the men's football or the men's basketball team, but it's also something where there's all these different ways of kind of aligning with that contract. And they're saying that, by ridiculing these players, by attacking these players in this way, that breached the contract. But the language is so broad that it gets to the point of being a little bit ambiguous and being a little bit really hard to kind of decipher and hard to kind of pin down exactly what it means to breach that contract. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can kind of look at it because of that. And that's usually a recipe for a very difficult legal fight if you're the one trying to argue breach of contract, because you really have to argue that it is a breach of contract, and especially if you look at later and some of the other clauses in the contract and what you're really kind of relying on in the termination clause, which is a material breach of the contract, which is beyond just breaching the contract in some small degree. It means like you would not have hired this person if you'd known he was going to do this, which may be a bit of a stretch.
It definitely feels like we're looming for a legal battle. That has been reported that Jerome Tang is going to be fighting this. He has hired legal counsel, and we're going to talk about in just a minute what that might look like. Just in your past experience, you've been covering this for some time. You follow sports laws. You mentioned you're an ex-lawyer. We talked about that here. Have you seen anything remotely close to this, or at least in this degree? Because again, it feels light, but it also feels almost unprecedented that they're doing this at this moment in time. I hate using that word, but it feels like that is after what happened in 2020. I feel like that word is just so weird now. But what is your thoughts on this? Have you seen anything remotely close?
Every once in a while, you see something like this where I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but every once in a while, you see a team try to kind of dangle that for cause kind of language. In fact, I'm blanking right now. There's one that comes to mind vaguely. That it actually just happened in the past year, where they very quickly reversed course and said, "Oh, we're actually not going to fire you for cause because we just don't feel like it's supported, and maybe we didn't think you were going to fight it. I don't know," but it's just kind of crazy to think, because of course they're going to fight it. There are millions of dollars at stake here, and again, every once in a while, something like this comes up where you want to try it, and really most of the time, it's mostly just a negotiation tactic. It's a way to kind of say, well, we're gonna hold you to this. We're gonna say it's for cause. We're gonna take you to court. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Except there's really maybe no intention. I don't know what's in Kansas State, what's in Gene Taylor's head right now, but there's no real intention of actually going to court. It's just a way to, try to get some leverage in order to negotiate that buyout down instead of having to pay the whole thing up front.
This might actually help with exactly what you're saying right there. On Monday, it was also reported that Gene Taylor asked, or I guess gave the option to Jerome Tang that he could finish the season and then resign after the year. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Jerome Tang said the only reason, through his lawyers, he said the only way he would do that is if he received the full $18 million. And then, of course, they went this route with termination for cause. So it kind of sounds like where you're going at, they're making this reasoning. They're going for this legal battle because they're looking for a settlement.
Yeah, and that's definitely not going to help matters if it does get to court. Being able to say, well, we would have kept you on, or we would have kept you on for the rest of the season and allow you to resign, because that's not something where it's a material breach of the contract. If it's a material breach of the contract, you want them gone right away. So allowing them to kind of resign on his own terms probably hurts them a little bit if this gets to court. But again, I just don't think this is actually going to get into court.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. And the fact that they let him coach one more game as well, that's something that came up during the press conference. He didn't have a great answer. I feel like Gene Taylor didn't have the best press conference, let alone. Would it have helped Gene Taylor, before we get into this, we'll move on just a second, would it have helped Gene Taylor during that press conference to just read a public statement and not take any questions instead of actually letting reporters ask questions? Because I feel like that almost made it look worse for Kansas State.
Oh, definitely. I mean, both from a public relations standpoint and a legal standpoint, because all of those statements are going to be admissible as statements against interest. But and again, that probably doesn't matter at the end of the day because again, I very much doubt that this is going to go to court or maybe there's a lawsuit filed, but certainly not go to trial. But even kind of just from a public relations standpoint, just allowing reporters to kind of poke holes in it and really kind of drive the wedge into it. This is why you see whenever you have pending litigation or potential litigation, people just refuse to comment and say I can't comment on pending or prospective litigation because I don't want to say anything that's going to hurt my case. And I didn't exactly hear what Gene Taylor. I did listen to the whole press conference, but yeah, from what you're telling me, it sounds like it probably would have been a lot better for him to just make a public statement and move on.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel makes so much sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. For the second straight offseason, scandal has hit the BYU football team. Receiver Parker Kingston is no longer with the school as he faces rape charges, and Locked On Cougars host Jake Hatch joined Drake Toll on Locked On Big 12 to give us the details on the story.
We will start with Parker Kingston, the BYU football team rocked by scandal once again this offseason, and in a similar vein to what happened to Jake Retzlaff and the Cougars this time last year. Then Richie Saunders, torn ACL, out for the season. And finally, we'll end the show with these are two major storylines in the Big 12. They both happen in the same team in 72 hours. Where does BYU go from here in both football and men's basketball? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Again, thank you for making these shows your first listen every single day. Oh, Jake, man. What would you pay to go back to like last Wednesday? Just put it in reverse.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. Let's start with the Parker Kingston story, and let's start like over a year ago. This is something that BYU has said it did not learn about until very recently. When does this whole thing actually start?
So the allegations allegedly happened February 23rd of 2025. So going back nearly a year ago, that's when this alleged incident took place down in St. George, Utah, which is about 3 hours south of Provo. And Drake, honestly, came seemingly out of left field. And that's the crazy thing about this, because I can tell you, when the Jake Retzlaff stuff dropped last May, in fact, that felt like it came out of left field. But for the second straight offseason, BYU football, as you mentioned, rocked by scandal, rocked by a major piece. In this case, Parker Kingston's already out of school. He's already been kicked off the football team. He is gone. So, yeah, the football program, not in a good way right now, understandably so.
This seems to have parallels, obviously, to the Retzlaff situation, but where I don't draw parallels, that's the most alarming piece. The first one being Retzlaff was still on the team, like had the option to remain on the team and be suspended and take his lumps that way. Why was this handled differently? Well, why is Parker Kingston immediately off the roster from what you're hearing?
So this one is a criminal case. The other one, while it did involve allegations of sexual assault, it was a lawsuit. It was not a criminal legal matter. It had already been looked at by the Provo police. They had passed on filing charges. This one, there's first-degree felony charges associated with it, and I can tell you that's a hard and fast no thank you from BYU to obviously put up with that. And it's unfortunate because Parker Kingston was on his way. He had a 1,000-yard season this past year. It was looking like he was going to be one of, if not the face of the BYU wide receiving core next year, alongside some really top talent like Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin on BYU's offense. It's a gut punch for this football program because he was a guy who looked like he was ready to take yet another step in his football career. And criminal charges, that's just something that BYU will not tolerate. And they obviously shoved him off and said, hey, you're gone.
I mean, this is huge for the Big 12 because you lose one of the best receivers in the conference, not just last year. He was very underrated in the Big 12, and he would have been maybe the best going into next season. But as big of a storyline as it is for the Big 12, it's shocking for BYU to go through the same thing. Feel like you're going through the same thing, but amplified, worse. And Jake, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you would echo similar sentiments. In a situation like this, my thoughts, my prayers are with everyone involved. The victim coming first, the alleged victim coming first here. And that display of love is the same thing I said about the Jake Retzlaff case. And you know what? The alleged victim there, whether she was ultimately lying or misconstrued or whatever it was, she deserves your thoughts and love too. That's at least what I believe. That's what I subscribe to. And so my thoughts are with those who are involved in this case, and it seems much different. My thoughts are with Parker Kingston's fiance or ex-fiance that was announced publicly a week before this news dropped. Jake, so many storylines to go with in this one, but let's talk about the abruptness that you just mentioned. You know, again, he announced his engagement at a BYU basketball game. This just didn't seem like the guy. I mean, Retzlaff in that same vein, as Parker Kingston had a series of off the field issues where you say, you know what, that guy had secrets or nuggets leading up to this.
No, none of that. Here's the thing, Parker. The one thing I knew about him is he liked to golf. That's what I knew about him, Drake. He's a scratch golfer for all intents and purposes. Best golfer on BYU's football program. I had no notion whatsoever this is a guy who had off the field issues, because he is always, to my knowledge before this, had kept his nose clean. And obviously in retrospect, that appears to not be the case here. That's why I said it came so out of left field, because there was not a notion in my brain that Parker Kingston was going to be hit with felony rape charges and find himself in an inmate's uniform down there in 5th District Court and having to pay $100,000 in bail.
Is there a chance that Parker Kingston ever suits up for BYU again?
I'd be hard-pressed to say he does, because I just don't know that unless it's complete exoneration. We're talking this woman recants, whatever it takes for complete exoneration of him. I just, that's the only way that I see a path back to him playing for BYU. And in fact, I'd be hard-pressed to think he's going to play for another football program with this type of charge or charges being levied against him.
As we've learned in cases like these, there are rare cases the NCAA moves quickly. They moved very quickly with Jake Retzlaff. They ensured he could play for Tulane. If it is found that he's never met this person, all allegations are unequivocally physically false. Certainly that'll be a different story. But as we learned with Retzlaff, there's a lot to get through. What if it's an honor code violation? There's so many questions to ask as it pertains to BYU. Jake, before we go into Richie Saunders, man, double whammy today. This news with Parker Kingston. If you're Kalani Sitake, I mean, what do you do? Where do you go? How do you deliver this news to your team for the second consecutive year?
I think you get him in the same room and say, guys, understand that what we have here at BYU, and the reason why they have the as stringent an honor code as they have, Drake, at BYU, is to prevent stuff like this from happening. And that's got to be Klein's message to you guys. Guys, if you follow the rules we set out for you here, guess what? None of it is going to be affecting you. And yes, there are instances where people make major mistakes. Yes, that does happen. But, man, you got to understand, guys, that this is a situation for the second straight offseason. We have had one of our star players fall by the wayside because they couldn't live up to the standard we have set in this program. Stick to the standard and understand that what we're doing, we're having a lot of success. Don't screw it up.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel makes so much sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. The Chargers have a new defensive coordinator in Chris O'Leary, and he has started to fill out the coaching staff underneath him. David Drogmeyer and Daniel Wade tell you all the names you need to know on Locked On Chargers.
Chris O'Leary, the Chargers defensive coordinator, is adding coaches to his staff. And one guy he got very lucky to add with a ton of experience is Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach from the Pittsburgh Steelers, was there for a very long time and got a lot of guys to play really, really good football under his tutelage. And they also found their inside linebackers coach as well. Sean Spence is a former NFL player and also had a lot of success with Chris O'Leary at Western Michigan, where he had some great success with his pass rusher who is about to get paid and get drafted very, very high. And the coaching staff on the offensive side almost completely set outside of just a couple of positions.
Yeah, it feels like any day now we could be getting the coaching staff is set, kind of sent out by this Chargers team. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, it's not often you see someone like the Chargers are getting in Denzel Martin getting hired as an assistant to do something he's already done at a very high level over the last several years, and that's exactly what's happening. Per Jordan Schultz, sources say the Chargers are hiring former Steelers outside linebackers coach Denzel Martin as an assistant outside linebackers coach on Jim Harbaugh's staff. And like I said, Mike Tomlin let go, maybe not as much of a surprise, but he'd been there forever. This is one of the guys who was very rapidly rising up through the defensive side of their coaching staff. And now, since, Mike Tomlin's taking a year away, he's kind of just out there and the Chargers find a way to go get him.
I mean, this is a fantastic move. I mean, I think when you look at this type of position coach and how long he's been working with this same type of unit, you don't see them be an assistant for this long. Usually they're already moving up the chain and they're, having opportunities for other positions. And hey, who knows? Maybe he did have opportunities to, take on a higher position, but maybe saw the opportunity to join a franchise who is on the up, a team that's been in the playoffs the last couple of years, who's had a really, really good defense and some really, really good pass rushers that he's going to be able to work with. And he's really been able to put his fingerprints on guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig, who have had a lot of success over there in Pittsburgh. And I mean, it's hard not to say that this guy had a hand in helping them get the most out of themselves and get that success.
Yeah, I mean, his first season taking over as the lead outside linebackers coach, TJ Watt had 19 sacks. I mean, he's been there, assisting with that unit for several years as well. Even when he didn't have the main job title, he pretty much was that guy in conjunction with their defensive line coach there. But he's basically been the guy there for 5-6 years now at this point, and got there in 2016 as a scouting assistant, ended up moving over to the coaching side, but made his way all the way up to being their main outside linebackers coach. And all three of those guys you mentioned had 7+ sacks in 2025. But also just getting someone who's now been a part of 7 different top 10 defenses since 2016 on that coaching staff, because there's one thing you kind of always know about the Steelers, right? Tough, hard-nosed, physical defenses.
Yeah.
And as a coach, Jim Harbaugh kind of embodies a lot of those things that the Steelers organization, is really fond of and takes really seriously. And I do think the other kind of part of this is you do have a guy in Dylan Roney who is a young up-and-coming coach, right? Probably not the worst thing in the world for him to have somebody in there, right, who's a veteran voice that's been through a lot of stuff to kind of help him along with this room.
No, it's not. I think that the Chargers clearly think very, very highly of Dylan Roney, as they gave him a defensive coordinator interview so early on in his coaching career. So that's pretty rare. You don't really see that a lot. But, we know with Coach Harbaugh, it's very important to, grow his players on the field and his coaches on the sidelines as well. They want to get the most out of those guys. They want to help them get where they want to go just as much as they want to help the players get where they want to go. So adding a guy with this much experience that's had success with these outside linebackers to go along with Dylan Roney, who the last couple of years has had some good success with the Chargers, and obviously with Tuli Tuipulotu coming off of a career year.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for someone like Denzel Martin is wondering who's going to be in that room for him, right? And the Chargers did make another big hiring. They found their inside linebackers coach, Sean Spence, who we're going to talk about, really having to do a couple of things to kind of make his mark on that room. And I think for someone like Denzel Martin, one of the places where he could get a big win potentially early is getting some use out of someone like Kyle Kennard, right? Like we saw last year with Justin DeBoybe, with Mike Elston having that full extra year, right, to be able to come back and be a major contributor the next year. that will be what Denzel Martin is kind of tasked to do in some way, right? Him and Dylan Roney in conjunction to be able to get something out of a 4th-round pick in the 2025 draft, especially with the uncertainty of that room right now, with your two of your 3 best players, Dafe Owe and Khalil Mack, headed into unrestricted free agency. There could have to be a lot of development in that room. There could have to be a lot of kind of maximizing of talent in that room, depending kind of on how things shake out there. But I do think to get someone like this, who obviously seems like he's done a really, really good job in Pittsburgh, coming from a same kind of philosophy, someone that Chris O'Leary obviously seemingly wants in the door, Jim Harbaugh just wants on the staff, can't really hurt you, right? And I think if for someone like Dylan Roney, who's already getting defensive coordinator buzz from his own team, if something does happen to him, now you have a replacement already in-house. But that wasn't the only assistant we heard about over the last week, because Pete Thamel says sources Chargers are hiring Rutgers outside linebackers coach Julian Campenny as an assistant defensive line coach. He spent the last 2 years at Rutgers and spent the prior 5 seasons at Bowling Green. He's a former UConn player and grad assistant at Boston College. So to me, David, this is just another kind of one of those young defensive coaches that the Chargers want to get on the staff and maybe mentor a little bit and see what he can become.
Well, hey, not a bad place for him to kind of get to the NFL level and learn under one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL. And I say that quite confidently, because if you see what the Chargers have been able to get out of the guys that they've had in that defensive line room, I mean, we were blown away. I mean, with Mike Elston's ability to get the most out of these guys and really not really see much of a drop off at almost any level whenever they had guys rotate in, and they had a lot of them, a lot of guys rotating in. I mean, last year, the year before, we were very concerned about that room. We just didn't think there was enough talent, and Coach Harbaugh said, no, we're good. Don't worry about it. I know we're good, and he was right. I mean, they're absolutely good, and it's probably because he knew exactly what he had in Mike Elston. So having a guy of that level, of that pedigree, to be able to teach this guy and really, bring him in into the fold where he's already had a ton of success, I think is a great launching point for him to start his NFL career.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And like you said, the Chargers defensive line has been maximized since Mike Elston took over, and have had a couple breakout players like a Poona Ford and a Tier Tart, who have both gotten big contracts in large part because of the development or rate they're able to show on this defensive line. And I think now the thing becomes the conversation we'll have, later on this week, is just what happens if you got him some real blue chip talent on that defensive line? What could they be able to do? But I do think that, this is the Chargers kind of continuing that pipeline of collegiate defensive coaches to the NFL, just like Jesse Minter was at one point, just like Dylan Roney was at one point, just like Chris O'Leary was at one point. And so when you have that kind of track record, you get excited about hires like this. And I think especially with someone who's shown some versatility, who was a defensive lineman, but is working more with the outside linebackers coach. And someone we're going to talk about in Sean Spence, who was an inside linebacker in the league and has been a pass rush specialist, or was last year, from Chris O'Leary. But there's one thing that's for sure. When you're the only guy so far that's been taken from that Western Michigan staff that he just left to come to the Chargers in OA, he must think really highly of you.
That's all for today's Big 6 and 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 and 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 and 30 NBA, the Big 3 and 30 NFL, or the Big 3 and 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.